Hello.
Hello. Are you ready to see your room divider? Here she is.
That's what fell off your car? The wood that fell off your car?
Sometimes disaster breeds creativity. For instance, if one had gone to the hardware store and located the 4-foot by 8-foot plywood that said person came to the hardware store for, hoisted said board onto their cart, and then tied it to the roof of their car, only to have a huge gust of wind rip that plywood in half when the car wasn't even moving. So really one could have just bought 2 4x4 boards to begin with and saved themselves the entire trouble. Well, I'm sure that you've guessed by now that this is not a hypothetical situation. And said person is me. And said plywood was destroyed, but not lost. But as you can imagine, one can't really return plywood that was accidentally ripped in half by the wind. So it was time to get creative. Hi, I'm Liz, and welcome to the Leopard Lodge, a channel dedicated to creative projects in the home. This trip to the hardware store was for a very specific project. I was trying to build a hinged room divider for my friend Ellie. You've probably heard me mention her on the channel before. I made her a desk. I'm helping her redecorate her new living room. And this is just another piece of that puzzle. Luckily, I already had an entire Pinterest board dedicated to this type of thing. And here are some of my inspirational photos. If you can remember all the way back to one of my very first videos where I refreshed my rental kitchen in my old apartment, you may remember that I wanted to cover up the exposed water heater that sat right next to the stove. This water heater was truly the bane of my existence, and I had all of these grandiose plans to make one of these room partitions where there were arches and cane and a bunch of stuff, but I just wound up not having the budget for it and utilized 2 vintage closet doors instead. But my heart was still thinking about that room partition of my dreams. So it was finally time to let my ideas and imagination run wild. Well, not too wild, because once again, still on a budget, but we'll come back to that. See, my original plan was to get 4 12-inch by 6-foot boards that would be 3 1/4 inch thick. Make some arches, do some cutouts, add some caning. But have you seen the price of wood these days? It is out of control. That plan was going to cost me, or Ellie, like $80 before the paint and the caning, and just wasn't in the budget. And I'm sure many of you can relate. I need to keep this project at around $50. So 3 1/4 inch boards were out, painting was out, cutouts were out. After a lot of hemming and hawing and drawing different designs, I decided that I could probably get by with 1/4 inch thick wood. But since the wind blew it in half, I was probably incorrect about that thought. However, like I said, disaster breeds creativity, so this is what I did. I sulked about the boards for a good half an hour, and I pressed on. I clamped the 2 halves together, marked off as close as I could get to the ragged edge, which wound up giving me a nice round 45 inches, and I lost 3 inches. Drew myself out a nice straight line, and sawed off that ragged edge with my circular saw. As you may have already figured out with math, I'm going to get 3 boards that are 48 inches tall by 15 inches wide. Well, technically 6 boards, but the pieces are going to stay sandwiched together, and we'll circle back to that in a moment. I broke out my new Craig Rip Cut jig, which I was using for the very first time.
With a Craig Rip Cut, you can easily make accurate, straight cuts with your circular saw every single time.
I purchased this pre-owned on eBay. Hot tip, you don't always have to pay full price for tools. And I lined it up to the 15-inch mark. I'm not going to give you a tutorial on how to use this jig at this time. I'm still figuring it out, but there are a lot of videos available on YouTube. This thing is pretty cool and allows me to make straight and even rip cuts without a table saw, which I definitely do not have A, room for, and B, money for. So the jig made easy work cutting the boards once I got the hang of it. The only thing I'll say is that I definitely struggled when I got to the end of the board because I'm so short, but I'm sure there's some way to deal with that. I don't have sawhorses, maybe I'm missing some equipment. It was tricky to figure out where to clamp them, but like I said, this was my first time using it, and I'm sure I'll get better at it. Now, of course, I'm sure you're thinking that 48 inches is much too short for a room partition, and you would not be wrong. But I do have a solve, and we're going to get there. With my pieces cut out, it was time to draw my arches. I accomplished this by dividing the width of the board in half. So 15 inches divided by 2, 7.5 inches. Found the center point at the top, and then measured 7.5 inches down from there and made a mark. I placed the point of the compass on the mark, and then was able to draw a perfectly even arch on both sides. Using clamps to keep things from shifting around, I used my jigsaw to cut along my markings. And now we get to the first of 2 hacks that saved the day after the very tragic plywood ripping in half on the roof of the car situation. I had some scrap wood in a variety of widths, 6, 8, and 12 inches respectively. I measured 15 inches long, once again, on each of my different sizes, and cut them with my circular saw. Why I didn't use the Craig Rip Cut jig again is anybody's guess. I should have. It would have been easier. It would have been more precise. I don't know what I was thinking. For simplicity's sake, I'm going to refer to these boards from now on as my extenders. And that's what they're going to do. They're going to extend the arches. I got my first set of sandwiched arches, placed them on the table, slid one up, grabbed my first extender, applied a thick and even coat of wood glue, lined it up at the end on the bottom piece of plywood, and clamped it down. Then applied more glue to the rest of the exposed arch. Placed the other piece of plywood on top, lining it up with the top of the extender. I, of course, repeated this on all 3 sections, using various objects in my yard to weight down the pieces. And voila! My arches just got 6, 8, and 12 inches longer, respectively, and it was time to call it a night. The next morning, I woke up with the intention of knocking out all the painting and wrapping up this project by the end of the day, which is a classic mistake of mine. To think I will ever accomplish anything so neatly. But something was missing for me. They just weren't tall enough. I mean, I think the tallest one was still shorter than me. I'm only 5'2". I journeyed back to my scrap wood pile and saw a board that I hadn't seen before. It was another 12-inch wide by about 4 feet long. So I got an idea. I broke down the board into 15-inch sections once again, this time remembering to use my Craig rip cut jig. Thank God. And we are going to draw more arches, but this one's going the other way. After finding the center, I measured 1.5 inches in from each side, kept the point of the compass at the top of the wood in the center, and drew the arch starting at one marking over to the other. I think you can probably guess what comes next. Back to the jigsaw. And as you can see, I created a little stand for the arches to extend them roughly another foot. But it took me a while to figure out how I was going to secure this to the top. Wood glue alone was not going to cut it, but that was the obvious start. Enter these little mending braces placed strategically on the sides with one hole on each piece. You simply add a screw on each side and repeat. When that was all dry, it was finally ready for paint. Starting with primer, of course. Even though there was an obvious front side to this partition, I wanted to still be able to provide 2 different moods with different paint colors. On the back side, I went with a more calming vibe, this fun retro kind of teal color that comes off a little bit more green on camera than it really is. It's called Garden View by Benjamin Moore. And on our pretty side, the front arch was painted in a light peach called Phoenix Sand, followed by a slightly darker shade of the same color called Monticello Peach for the top arch and sides. It took lots of painter's tape and multiple coats. I was honestly working on this for a few days, adding coats before work and after work, going in to do touch-ups where one color had invaded the other color's space, but it was eventually, finally dry and ready for hardware. Using my level to make sure that the boards were starting in the same place, I added 2 hinges at each join. One set of hinges went on the peach side so it would fold one way, and the other set on the teal side so it would fold the other way. I'm sure you're already starting to see how beautiful this came out, so go ahead and tap a like on this video. I would really appreciate it. After this, I made the choice to go with a couple coats of clear polyurethane. I don't think this is a piece that would necessarily get brushed up against and banged into all the time, but at this point, I had fallen in love with the piece and had decided that I would need shared custody of it for my jewelry craft fairs. Enter photo of me using it last weekend. So I knew if I was gonna be moving this around occasionally, folding it up, putting it in my car, that kind of a thing, I just wanted to keep it from getting scratched up because I put a lot of work into this. But it is done and I love it. and I sure hope Ellie likes it too.
I actually can't even believe how beautiful. First of all, it's like a gorgeous Art Deco piece. It's blowing me away.
This is the back side, so I wanted to have like a calm side.
Stunning. I cannot believe this gets to go in my apartment.
Let me know in the comments if you want to make a room partition and what you'd be trying to cover with it or divide with it. I do have another friend who wants one, so you know, I might just be making another one at some point. Hopefully that one will have Kane in it because I sure do want to do that project. I just can't wait for it. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Bye. Did I wear this shirt last time? I feel like I might have worn this shirt in the last one. I'm really low on shirts. And yet I can't open my shirt drawer. Okay, bye.